as not to disturb the speakers. It is said leadership has the capacity to translate a vision into reality. Our next panel, co-hosted by the India Leaders for Social Sector, talks about leadership as the lever for catalytic social impact. I would like to welcome Archana Ramachandran, Director at the ILSS, who will be running through the session and moderating a panel later on. Welcome, Archana.
Thank you, Shaili and Nudge. We are delighted to be here to talk about something that's super important to all of us. And how we're going to do this is, I'll start by giving you a little bit context on why we think this conversation is really important today, and then move from there. So all of us here obviously know about the tremendous potential and the important role that the social sector plays in India today. And yet the reality is that for the sector that's solving a lot of other challenges, there are so many challenges that we as a social sector face, right? No prizes for guessing that the top 3 challenges that the sector faces today are talent, strategy, and capital. Any of you here in the sector who's not facing any of these challenges? Then we might add you as a panelist here. Then, so that's really the context of today, right? Now, where ILSS comes in is where we constantly think about talent and leadership, because our hypothesis is that we get the right leaders, and then the leaders will figure out the strategy and the capital, right? And so we are blessed to have all of our waking hours at work thinking about how do we really get the right talent and how do we build the right talent for the social sector. And so if we zoom out and see what are some of the learnings we've had, we've seen how there is an important role that different people play in the sector. What we call is a small group of crossover leaders, people who spent decades in the corporate sector, who probably did not have the chance to consider the social sector when they started off after college, and are now exploring the greener side of the social sector. And several others, like the people I see around in the room, who've chosen the brave decision of the social sector right after college, fighting with families, fighting with people like, what are you doing here? And choosing to commit to the social sector. And what we are finding is that both these sectors are a beautiful complement to each other. You will see that there are, for each of the sectors, that there are assets that we have, and then there are some gaps that we have, and how do we really complement each other to be able to work together? And so what have we learned about our approach to leadership development? The first one, of course, is getting the right people on the bus, as Jim Collins says. And so how do we really bring the best talent wherever they're coming to us from? The second is, once we have the talent, once we've infused the right talent, how do we really upskill the talent? Because all of us, if you're able to operate at our full potential, then the possibilities are just really enormous. And last but not the least, the one constant thing that we think about is how do we accelerate the impact of our organizations so that we are sustainable beyond 3-year plans, beyond one founder, and really are able to do this over time. And so in order to do this over the next 70 minutes, we thought about how to make this really relevant to everyone. And we said, can we bring in one of these leaders that we think about, you know? Because every time we say talent, leaders, founders, as we get into the conversation, can we root ourselves in the real founder, right? Can we root ourselves in seeing, listening, interacting with the founder, and use this person as an example to think about all of the founders and the leaders that we are all serving, we are all working with. Some of you here are founder leaders. And so I'm delighted to welcome Vishal, the founder and CEO of Waste Warriors, to really talk about his own journey in leadership and how he's approached leadership for the team. And my invitation would be, as you listen to him, 2 things. One is, of course, listen to Vishal and his journey that he's been on prioritizing leadership. The second is, today we want you to think about Vishal as an example of the leaders that we all are and the leaders that we all work with. On that note, Vishal, over to you.
You are not a leader. till you have produced another leader who can produce another leader. This is one of the first quotes I ever came across in my professional career, and it left a very deep impression on me on what it meant to be a leader. My journey with Waste Warriors actually started 4 years ago. I am a non-founding CEO. The organization was around 8 years old at that time, had an annual budget of less than 3 crores, had about 50 employees, and this was my first time as a CEO, leading an organization. And it was in the middle of the first and second wave of the COVID pandemic in December 2019. There was an air of uncertainty around us. We were having severe cash flow issues, and we were sitting on a large pile of trash, literally. The first few months of joining as a leader, I came across the ILSS fundraising program in one of the WhatsApp groups. And I realized that this is something that I desperately needed because I had zero experience in fundraising and I had zero networks in the development sector. But when I looked at the cost of the program, I felt, oops, ye to nahi ho payega. We wouldn't be able to afford this program, and decided to let it pass. But fate had other plans. One of our long-term donors who had supported us for the last 5-6 years were exiting that year, and they decided to sponsor us for the program, and I immediately jumped at the opportunity. And the rest is history. I met Mayank at the fundraising program, and we actually hired him to lead our fundraising for the last 2 years. We recently sent Suraj for the ILSS fundraising program, and he now leads our fundraising team. We sent Itosha for the Emerging Women Leaders program, and she got recently promoted to Director Programs at Waste Warriors. Sakshi is currently doing the program. Naveen did the People Practices program, and we hired Anshuman and Neeraj from the leadership program. So it's like when you taste something good, you crave for more, isn't it? I'm really glad to be here today because this is a topic that I'm deeply passionate about as much as about waste management, but the world might not know that. We will talk about why we need to invest in our leaders, how to start or sustain such initiatives, and what are some effective measures that have worked for us at Waste Warriors. Leadership is not about being in charge. It is about taking care of those in our charge. Great organizations always prioritize people and culture over everything else. First who, then what is the mantra. A colleague said something beautiful to me recently. She said, Waste Warriors is a home, school, and office at the same time. And this beautifully encompasses the kind of culture that we're trying to create at Waste Warriors. Investing in leadership always increases bandwidth, contrary to the beliefs of how do we find bandwidth for something like this. So when Suraj took up the fundraising team recently, it opened up bandwidth for Mayank to take on finance, admin, procurement, and multiple other functions. And that opened up bandwidth for me to focus on other org building initiatives. The smart people in the social sector have many reasons to leave. But I believe that there's one reason they would stay long term, and that is their loyalty to the leaders they trust. And investing in our leaders is what is going to build loyalty and trust. Right, Vishal, we understand this is important intuitively, it makes sense. But there's so much work to do. How do you find bandwidth for something like this? And I think there's only one way to look at it. If it's important and it needs to be done, it needs to be done, right? Like everything else we do in the social sector, nothing comes easy. It's more a mindset than anything else. However, I can guarantee you that within your organization, your team, and your funder community, existing funder community, you will have champions and early adopters. Identify them, start small, and build your muscle. Do not hesitate to ask money for capacity building and fundraising. Over the last couple of years, we've actually been successful in raising around 12 lakhs from very, very typical corporate CSR donors, at about 50% hit rate. Ask for money and fight for it like your life depends on it. And if it doesn't come through, you're not going to die. Nothing matters. So, along with this, what's important is to create a culture of learning around it. I have personally been inspired by sports all my life. And one thing that stands out about sportspersons is their practice time to play time ratio. They spend a far greater time practicing their skills than actually performing. They don't go from game to game. Why do we not expect our leaders to have that same investment to practice their leadership skills before performing those skills. And it's a bad excuse to say that, oh, we train our leaders and then they leave. I have two responses to that. That if you train and prepare somebody as a good leader and they leave, well, it's still good for the sector because we're strengthening the ecosystem, and we all know that single organization cannot solve the issues of our generations. And the second is, if you do it right, they are not going to leave you. They are going to become loyal to you and will fight for you with all their blood, sweat, and tears. And finally, it's important to be sensitive in our approach and not overemphasize on top leadership capacity building while ignoring the rest of the organization. We need to be inclusive in our approach and never forget to celebrate and appreciate good leadership whenever you see them. Here are some measures that have been effective for us at Waste Warriors, and not all of them cost a lot of money. Of course, the ILSS programs were a great hit for us, as you can see, but we've also custom designed our own cohort-based leadership accelerator program, and just this first quarter, we had 30 warriors graduate from that program. We've done a pilot of an OKR sprint with CollabX and are looking to scale that up now. We provide one-on-one coaching to people, leaders, whenever they need them, including myself when I was going through a difficult time. We send our teams to networking events and give them speaking opportunities. We send them on exposure visits, and we also provide spoken English classes, which is also a very key part of leadership. We provide them more opportunities to be part of org-level initiatives which go beyond their day-to-day work. And finally, we've set up recently a separate enabling function for learning and development, which is primarily driven through voluntary standing committees. We do not have a single extra person, but everybody chips in a little bit bandwidth, and we run this committee beautifully, investing in multiple learning and development initiatives. I want to end with this, that we are not going to solve all our problems in this generation. The problems we're trying to solve are far more complex, and one of the main reasons we're not going to be able to solve them is because the world is centered around greed and vested interest. These rare people actually prioritize the welfare of others over themselves. What better use of our time and resources than actually to invest in such leaders to perform to the best of their abilities? No matter where you are in your journey, today is a great day to start. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really, really inspiring. And I have to say, I will have to sign up for one of the ILSS courses now. I would now like to welcome Anu Prasad, founder and CEO for ILSS, to stage on the panel. Surabhi Bikhchandani, sorry about that, partner at Quadrangle. Gayathri Nair Lobo, CEO at ATE Chandra Foundation. Ishmeet Singh, Senior VP and Lead for Digital Bharat Collaborative at Piramal Foundation. And Ruchee Anand, Senior Director, Talent and Learning Solutions at LinkedIn. Over to you, Archana.
Thank you. Thank you, Vishal, for those remarks. I remember as we were talking to Vishal to anchor us in this conversation, he said, there are so many times I've presented, it's always been about waste warriors. This is the first time I had the opportunity to reflect on how I approach leadership, and I thought that was fantastic. So thank you, Vishal, for that. For really anchoring us in this conversation. And I go back to what I started with as we open our remarks to these incredible panelists that we have today. Vishal is one of the many, many organizations and the leaders that we have today. And in this panel, we want to explore what are some of the trends that we see from different lenses to this topic, what are some best practices that we can learn, and what are really some opportunities and hopes that we have. Anu, since everyone is talking about signing up for an ILSS program, I'd love to begin with you and tell us a bit about how you view the need for capacity building in the social sector and why ILSS was really started and what's that journey been?
Sure. Thanks, Archana. So excited to be here. So really, I'm going to go back way. I had a corporate career somewhere in my past life. And I saw the light at some point. I was a part of Ashoka University about 12, 14 years ago when it was still an idea in the minds of some of the founders. And that's where I actually, being the dean of a postgraduate program, I was dealing with these millennials who are, change makers and leaders in their own rights. And I saw that as opposed to my generation, where I think my ambition was to be a part of a foreign bank or something, I don't know, I'm almost embarrassed by that now. They were really looking to do more public service and really do work in the social impact space. And that was my sort of initiation through them. And I really pay homage to Ashoka and to the students there for bringing me closer to what was happening in the social impact space. And in fact, we launched a Mother Teresa Fellowship, and Amit Chandra, who's the fathership of capacity building, I must say. Actually, we decided to actually fund these young people who wanted to work in areas which weren't going to give them the kind of salaries that maybe their parents expected them. So we would actually subsidize their salaries to make it palatable for them to take these chances and work in the field. And so that was when I was at Ashoka. When I left Ashoka, I had a conversation with Ashish Dhawan, who was, of course, a part of the Ashoka founding team. And we were like, look, this was 2016, 17. CSR laws had been enacted. There was, a lot of private philanthropy coming into the sector, which currently is at actually more than 1 lakh crore a year. Just private philanthropy, which is CSR, and family foundations, etc. And his thought was, look, there's a lot of money coming into the sector, and where is the absorptive capacity? How do we sort of build leadership for this sector? How do we build a leadership bench? The sector is very passionate, committed, driven, motivated founders. But can we bring the right kind of talent? Any sector to grow and thrive needs talent to sort of be attracted. Millennials were showing the way, but at the leadership level, how do we really bring in the talent for the sector? And so that was the birth of ILSS, really thinking that I crossed over. He was a crossover himself from private equity to philanthropy. Can we find people like us who have skill sets that we can use in the social impact sector? And so at ILSS today, at the same time, I must do a shout out to Britspan, because it just happened that at the same time in 2017, they came out with a seminal report on the lack of a leadership bench, which was something they had done research with more than 250 nonprofit organizations, most of them saying they didn't have succession planning, they didn't have enough of, they didn't prioritize capacity building and leadership development. And it segued nicely into our scheme of things, that there was someone that had done this research for us that we passionately believe to be true. So at ILSS, it's really 5 bets. You can't do everything, everywhere, all at once for the sector. There are lots of opportunities. I don't need to tell you guys that we are in the bottom quadrant, of all the human development indicators. But the good news is there is funding, there is, like I said, a lot of private philanthropy, there's CSR money coming into the sector. And we can be, the social impact sector can play a catalytic role in solving some of the most intractable problems of the country. And so we take 5 bets at ILSS. We believe that to strengthen the social impact sector, of course you need to bring in talent, people who have honed their specialization, and you will speak to some of them in the panel. Ishmeet you'd love to hear his story. But also build the leadership in the sector. How do we build the leadership of the sector to be able to scale, create impact? How do you teach people to fundraise? Because again, it's a mindset game. Nobody likes to fundraise, but if you don't know how to raise money for your organizations, you're not going to be able to do what you really want to do. How do you set up your boards? What is your governance? And the last, which is the newest thing that we're doing, is really working around digital. Because if you don't understand technology and how digital can help you, you're not going to be able to, again, create the kind of impact you need to create a scalable solution. So those are the bets ILSS is taking, and we really do believe that philanthropists and funders need to really put aside some money for capacity building and leadership development. I know that A.T. Chandra has been really spearheading it, as has TCF, but we need many more to really understand that you can be funding the work, but you have to also fund the middle, the organization's ability to sustain itself, right? Why is the expectation that the organization starves itself and, to be able to do the work they do? So, yeah, that's our story.
Yeah. Thank you, Anu. What a lovely segue. I think for all of us who write funding proposals and wonder where to put our salary costs, because ultimately, it's the people who drive these projects, and yet there are so many constraints and limitations around what is direct cost, what is indirect cost, what is program cost, what is non-programmatic cost. While there has been progress, so much more can be done. You've already spoken a little bit about the importance of funding and the role of A.T. Chandra Foundation. What I find interesting is that because we're a capacity building organization as ILSs, and we meet many capacity building partners, the chances are if you've done some incredible capacity building work in India in the last decade, you've been funded by A.T. Chandra Foundation at some point of time, right? Or continuing to be funded. And so Gayathri, tell us about, now a lot of people are talking about investing in capacity building. A.T. Chandra Foundation was perhaps one of the first to say, we really need to bet on this so that we build capacity for the sector, so that all the orgs that are doing the incredible work are able to do it better. What was the thinking behind this, and how did you make this front and center?
Thanks, Archana. So initially, the foundation was working in many, many areas, right? So there was education, there was health, there was, we were really spread thin, and this was even before I joined the foundation. I knew Amit and Archana as funders when I was raising funds at Teach for India. And I remember reaching out to them saying, you've been a big funder, can you continue? And Amit's question to us at that time was, what is it that nobody else is funding? And I said, I've never had a funder ask me that. And I said, well, HR, and we have a staff retreat coming up, and we have no money to spend on it. And he said, fine, I'm funding HR. And so that was my first introduction to the foundation. But the foundation over time evolved, realizing that kind of funding, which one, nobody else is doing, but two, very catalytic, can have far greater impact than just programmatic funding. An organization needs to be able to focus on the work, and the way to be able to focus on the work is to not have to worry about, can I pay salaries next month? And so then we actually shut down a lot of our other work that we were doing and said, let us focus on three things and do it well, and maybe, and the aim was, in 5 years' time, everybody is talking capacity building and we no longer have to do it. Like, it's a problem that's solved. And I keep saying, I know we've done our job when, to the example you gave, when an NGO asks for money and they're not embarrassed to put salary costs, but it's actually embarrassing for a funder to ask, what's your non-program ratio in this? That's the dream, and that's what we're working towards.
Wow. I can see everyone's eyes saying like, yes, that one day. Yes. Thank you, Gayathri, for that. Ishmeet, Anu spoke a bit already about the crossover leaders, and particularly over the last 5 to 6 years, we've seen so many crossover leaders like you who've spent several decades in the corporate sector and then switched over to this side. Tell us, in your experience, firstly, how has it been switching over to this side, what we call the greener, better side? And what do you see as similar and different in approaches to talent, leadership development? Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think my journey was because I wanted to, in my last quarter of my active work life, give back to the community and work, especially in the area of public health, and that's where my need and passion came from. And then, as Shelly said to me just now, I had to reboot from my very different corporate life to invest in ILSS. I think that was a great investment I did, as well as, of course, studying public health a bit. And for me, the sort of COVID year was the was the opportunity. Got full 1 year to do both of that. ILSs also learned with me of doing an extended program. So we did that. I did that for that 1 year to really understand what the sector is. And ILSs, I think, really gave me a good window and opportunity to really understand the sector from outside. What are some of the practices? Create a network. Really get my passion further fueled up in terms of what are the needs in this sector. So I think those were great sessions we had. Recall many of them still now. Once I moved into the sector, I think, very interesting observations. And of course, the numbers are huge. High number of small NGOs working in the sector and all working on relevant issues of social, economic, and environment issues. And all driven by the passion of the founder. We just heard Vishal talk about it. And I think that really is a driving force in this segment and sector, and which is what I saw from outside when I came in. And what does the founder do? I think other than navigating a balance between the impact he or she desires and the needs of the donor and stakeholder on one side. You rarely get donors like these, but you have donors and stakeholder needs which may not be exactly matching to the impact you desire to achieve. So that's one challenge they have. And the other challenge which they have, other than, of course, keep on running after funding and support, is to actually look for talent inside. And unfortunately, the talent which is there is that big challenge in the industry as well, in the sector itself. Especially when you go to tier 3, tier 4 towns. The talent, this sector is really a fallback option. And I started my journey with working in states like Bihar and UP. And I realized very clearly that the talent there, for them, this is not the first option at all. So it's a fallback option. There are no incentive in the sector to really hold them back. Their engagements are obviously poor. So the founder who's working there and smaller NGOs working there, it's really the founder's passion which is driving it and whatever talent he or she can gather and inspire within this. So the bandwidth of the founder really becomes a big constraint and the capacity talent available. The last thing which I observed was that the leadership this sector required was, of course, as Archana mentioned earlier, about strategy development, fundraising, communication, and building a whole plan. But I think there are some areas like government engagement, stakeholders. A founder can't do all of this and that as well. And which is why you find many of the NGOs actually not engaging with the government so much. But the government, it's very important to engage with the government because that's where you really get to scale up your impact. But I think the biggest gap in leadership comes is when you want to manage growth and scale up. And that's where I found the biggest gap because if the founders are not able to expand their leadership, and as Vishal told his story, I think that's something very clearly up. Investing in the second rung of leaders in the organization is just not happening in the sector. And it was very evident because we had come from corporate and we'd seen that kind of investment which the corporates do in terms of building entire range of leaders across every function, every hierarchy level. And here is one sector which is struggling to do that because there is no talent in the market who wants to come in, of course, but at the same time not investing enough in developing the talent. And that's where you require leadership for talent development, talent retention, and making sure that the vision of the organization is able to inspire a lot more people to rally behind the cause and not just a founder and one or two people around him. So that's really what I experienced.
Thank you for sharing that. It's incredible to hear about how, we say that often founders have this, there's so many strengths they bring and they're a force in itself. And what is the surrounding leadership team or the management team that can complement the founder herself or himself? And I think you spoke about it really, really well. Thank you, Ishmeet. We've heard from Ishmeet, who shared one experience about what you've seen in your experience. And I'd love to bring Surabhi in. Surabhi, because you wear multiple hats, right? One is of an executive search person. The second is as a coach, you work with several social sector leaders, and also as a funder. And I'd love to hear from you on what have you seen as trends in leadership and capacity building, and what are the biggest pain points that people are saying there are in the social sector today?
Thanks, Archana. Good to be here. So yes, I have been wearing multiple hats. So let me, share my experiences around that. So first of all, regarding how the social sector has evolved over the last 10 years, I think there is now more importance and realization that there has to be, investment in capacity building or learning and development. But I would say that the larger organizations in the sector have that benefit, maybe because they had a strategic philanthropist who, kind of gave them the idea, or they had access to different training programs and, resources. But I would say that the smaller organizations still struggle because traditionally they've been focusing on the programs at the grassroots level, and their funders also have not given untied funding that, okay, here's the money, do what you want. They probably said, oh, we are only going to fund the program. So then, given how small the organization is, it's mainly the, founder driving it. So yes, that is a challenge, but yeah, thanks to ILSS, as an ecosystem developer, the awareness has also been building up, and there is support for different organizations. Now about what support and challenges the organizations face and the support they need, I would say it is basically attracting talent, retaining talent, and of course succession planning. Now around these three are certain aspects. So attracting talent, of course, there may be this question about skills, yes, but for the people who are looking to join the sector, whether crossovers from the corporate or people who are actually passionate about the sector from day one, what do they look at? Just like in a corporate role, they will look at what is the reputation of the organization that I'm joining, what is the culture, do they respect their people, what is the founder like, is there a clear growth path for me to join that organization, what are their performance management systems. So I think people are looking at all this, and that is the prospective candidates or employees, and these affect attracting talent, and then again about retaining talent, they're all linked as well. A person would like to stay if the leadership style of the founder is very democratic or collaborative, and not micromanager in quotes. And people get space to do things, they are empowered. So I think, like Vishal said, that people would hang around and be loyal if you have the right environment to perform in. Because as it is, a touchy issue is compensation. Now that is a separate story, why there's this belief that compensation has to be lower in this sector, though people are doing such great work. Now that is a whole conversation itself. So without getting into that, if that is already low, then you have to kind of invest in other things to make people want to work. You can't say that, all that is not relevant, just focus on the program, work on the grassroots, and that's it. You have to think of these other things. So the leader has to think and try and create that organization culture.
Thank you so much, Surabhi. We're all talking about acquiring talent, growing talent, and we can't do it without mentioning LinkedIn. Incidentally, if you look at it, I think about a decade ago, the social sector was not really on LinkedIn. Now the chances are all of us here have either looked for a job, hired somebody, connected with someone on LinkedIn in the social sector today. And so Ruchee, tell us about what have you seen as the trends at LinkedIn, particularly in the post-COVID world. I feel like during those COVID years when we were all indoors, all those face-to-face meetings and those events got replaced with LinkedIn in-mails and messages and posts. So what have you seen as the evolution of LinkedIn for talent and leadership? And what can Indian social sector learn from this journey?
Sure. Firstly, thank you. Really inspired already. And so nice to Vishal. Really amazing. What a great opening. So, yes, to come to, in fact, a lot of things have already been said. I'll just add to that. When it comes to what have we seen or as a change, a few things, let me just call out. One, we've always felt that, yes, for this sector, what we need is a big heart, right, purpose-driven, mindset. And maybe that worked in the past, but that's not enough, right? Of course, that's why we are talking about so much of investing in learning and developing our leaders. And like Ishmeet said, the issues that we are talking about from a skills perspective is very much there even on the corporate side. Those are, in a way, some similar issues that organizations are facing. However, of course, when we look at it from a social sector perspective, I think there are a lot more, because a lot more can be done. And so just talking from a skills point of view, I actually shared this even yesterday. The biggest thing that we've seen on the platform between 2015 and last year, the skills required to be successful in any role. So let's say if there were top 10 skills that are required for anyone to be successful, 25% of those globally changed. So in India, it changed to about almost 30%. So 30% of the skills to be successful in a role shifted. Now that's slated to change by 70% by 2030. So what does this mean? That means that whatever I've traditionally been doing in my role, let's say if I'm in sales, these were the top 10 skills required for me to be successful. What I knew is not going to get me continue to be successful. I need to change and I need to upskill. So upskilling in any case across all sectors, across all functions is required. And it may not be just about technical upskilling. It could be a lot of things, that how do I actually negotiate virtually? How do I actually build that relationship? I may not be able to, like you said, post-COVID, maybe a lot of that, those dynamics changed, right? For example. So those are just small examples. The other thing is, again, to just validate this, another stat I wanted to share, we come up with jobs on the rise list. And 68% of those upcoming jobs on the rise were not there 20 years ago. We all know that, how much that's changing. So if we just take this aspect of how much of change, evolution that we're seeing, and which is going to continue to happen, from a social sector perspective, definitely, I think was very beautifully brought up in terms of the need for investing in people to build leaders. And a leader really is someone who's actually building more leaders, like you said. So how is that actually being done? So as an organization, how does an organization have that mindset? You brought up in your opening as well, from a mindset perspective. Is that mindset there in the leadership, is that we need to kind of continue to build? Also, Surabhi, you mentioned about attracting talent. I just want to also add to that. I think you're absolutely right. What do people look for when they want to join an organization? Be it in the social sector or in corporate. Yes, who are the people I'm getting to work with? First, of course, all said and done, there's a values alignment that comes in. Is this aligning to what I really want to do? Apart from that, and apart from compensation and benefits, even what data is telling us, that the three things that people look for. One is, do I get flexibility? Second, do I get advancement in my career? So how am I going to actually advance? And the third most important thing that people are looking for, is my organization going to invest in me, in upskilling me? So these three things we're seeing across the platform globally as well. So it's very much validated with what Surabhi's just shared, right? What is it that people look for? So I think those are the things that are going to be very important for us to kind of put that lens on. That yes, as a social sector, within the social sector, how do we attract, retain, as well as give people reasons to stay and grow, right? And that's going to be more and more fulfilling. Because this skill shift is very real, and how do people use more and more technology well? Because like we've even been talking about, people who know AI, more than that, people who know how to use AI will be the ones who lead. Not that AI is going to take away jobs, but it's about how you know how to adapt and use it. So adaptability, agility, these things are going to be very, very critical.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Ruchee. You've laid out the entire landscape of what's happening in talent and leadership. And I know Vishal also spoke a little bit about how you've approached your organization's approach to talent and leadership. Ishmeet, I'd love to bring you in and share about how do you all think about it at Piramal? How do you prioritize talent and leadership as a strategic priority? And what are some approaches that have been working and that you all have been trying?
Thank you. Of course, as Ruchee said, we were lucky to have a philanthropist who invested very early in building the institution as well as building leadership in the organization. So I think Mr. Piramal has been very, very, very kind enough to do that and not just focus on the program outcomes. And that's really been one. I think the second piece also comes from the values which the organization has always been driving, which is of doing well and doing good, and the vision of building Bharat. And that sort of lays the foundation of the leadership and the programs we do. And very uniquely, the whole leadership agenda also comes from the program itself of building Bharat. So there is, of course, a unique theory of change, which each of our 4 verticals is driving now. But the idea of that is that, working with the government for system change and building towards a bigger, better nation. And as you know, I mean, any building a nation exercise which always mean to challenge the traditional beliefs and values in the society. And that can only change if we are able to change mindset and behaviors of ourselves. So each of us, the leaders, are challenged that you have to be the change you wish to see in the world. And you have to take the responsibility of actually personal transformation if you want to drive positive change in the world. And that becomes a stepping stone for us, and the whole engagement around personal transformation and how that links to your seva bhav, your selfless seva bhav towards what you want to do. I think that becomes also the inspiration for all the leaders to rally around, and the teams. We have very large teams working on our programs across many states. So obviously the leaders need to inspire the same kind of engagement with each one of them. And that has to come in from your own personal journey and personal transformation. It has to begin from there. So we have 2 fellowship programs which you would have heard about, the Gandhi Fellowship and Karuna Fellowship, which are also based on the same principles of actually driving personal transformation to be able to inspire the community change, community work, which we do, as well as with the internal capabilities. And that really is, I would say, the unique thing which sort of binds us together as an organization. And that's really been helping in now creating a large set of leaderships, not only in what we call the senior leadership, but also in the program leaderships in each of the states, and getting them to empower them and giving them the agency to be engaging with the government on one side and the donor stakeholders, and of course, holding them responsible to engage and build the leaders, as Vishal said, within your own teams as well. Yeah,
Thank you, Ishmeet. What always strikes me about Piramal is, of course, there are several Gandhi fellows who go on to join on staff and several crossover leaders who are on staff. And there are just so many leaders at Piramal who are so deeply reflective about the role that our inner journey needs to play in this work. And it's actually really inspiring to see how you're able to do it.
Very diverse set as well.
Huh?
Very diverse set as well.
Yeah, that's why across crossover, across thing, it's just absolutely beautiful. Surabhi, actually, can you tell us a little bit about, in your experience working with several leaders that you've hired, you've coached, how do leaders think about investing in ourselves and our leadership to be able to do this? Once to thrive over time and not have burnout, and also to be able to institute this culture of leadership in our organizations?
Great question, Archana. So what I would say is the most important thing for any leader or founder is the awareness of what is the kind of leader they are. Now, as Vishal said, that his whole journey started because he realized, whether somebody told him about the fundraising program or whatever, but that was his aha moment, that, this is something I've got to do, and once I did it, then, how do I go further and share the knowledge downwards in the organization? So about awareness, there are so many online tools available if one doesn't have access to resources, to find out what sort of leader you are. Now, you may have heard of this framework called the Joe Harry framework, where it was started by 2 psychologists years ago. And there's one section in it called blind spot. So is a leader aware of his or her blind spots, which is something that is unknown to the leader, but others can see it. So, you can't really do anything regarding inner transformation, these, big words and, reflection and all that, unless you start from the beginning that, am I aware of what is the current situation? What sort of leader am I? Number 1. Number 2 is that, having worked with different, coaching different people and as a funder on the other side, there are some leaders who are just not open to feedback. Now, I don't know whether it's because they're a bit insecure or they have a bit of that control element. So, without really getting into too much of the detail, but if you're not open to feedback, you can't drive positive change. You can't expect the level below you to, be these great leaders when you yourself, have something lacking. So this being open to feedback, and, it comes across, if as a funder, you're just asking a question with very good intention, because you're observing something in the organization, then sometimes the leaders get really defensive and act like it's an interrogation, and then it just shows very clearly that that change, positive change, is not going to happen because the person is just not open to feedback. The third thing is that, of course, you want to do all this self-reflection and personal transformation for the leader. Then how do you measure that impact? So would you look at, okay, the attrition in my organization has gone down, or the outcomes are achieved in a better way? So the personal transformation is very important, but it also has to be linked to some outcome. So regarding the employees, is it, like I said, fewer people are leaving, people are staying on longer, there's more of a feeling of, team in the organization. So these are some of the things the leaders have to think about.
Yeah. A very critical role that leaders need to play to invest in our own selves. And obviously it has to translate to organizational outcomes as well. I'll bring in Ruchee to share a little about what do you see as the role of broadly platforms to be able to really facilitate the conversation around learning. I've been particularly intrigued by LinkedIn for nonprofits in itself. How old is it? It's not been, how many years has it been since? Because I would love to hear more on it, because I know that, like I said earlier, that LinkedIn as a common conversation in social sector didn't happen a decade ago. Now every chat, every networking, something, connect with this person on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn for nonprofits, learning happens on LinkedIn. So would love to hear, what do you see as the role of platforms like LinkedIn on leadership learning?
Sure. So, in fact, let me start by saying that why we do this, and our vision very clear, to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. So when we say every, that actually drives us to do, this is something, it's not written on the wall, it's something that we say every single day, because that drives us in every decision and every action that we are taking. By itself, today we are over 1 billion members globally. In India, about over 135 million. But we still feel that it's not just about the number of members, but it's who we are bringing. We want to make sure that there are no unintended consequences of when we are looking at growth, we're not leaving people behind. And I was just sharing with Surabhi as well earlier that our equity strategy is right at the, at the product level. It's not a byproduct or later. So for example, you all must have seen people you may know when you look at connecting. Many years ago, we realized that people who connect, that shows up is only people, if you are from a particular sector or a function, you'll actually get to just connect with people around in those, because that's what the algorithm was showing up. But we realized that the unintended consequences could also be that we are creating a large network gap. There are a lot of people from marginalized communities, or let's say either it could be gender or it could be, segments that will never get access to networks, because another thing is that where you live, where you grew up, where you work actually gives you a 12x advantage in terms of access to opportunity. And not everyone has access to opportunity. So we are very conscious of that fact, firstly, as a platform, that what is it that we are doing to make sure that more people get access, right, in the right way. And it's a trusted and a safe platform, because trust also forms one of our 3 core operating priorities as an organization. Coming back to why and what we're doing, again, for us, it's a very, like the social sector, or, LinkedIn for nonprofits is something which actually just kind of flows in, because that is something that we want to continue to do, to how do we kind of expand our reach, make sure that today the platform has the potential with over 1 billion members, let's say, billion members, millions of companies, so many jobs, skills with learning, LinkedIn Learning, we have about 22,000 courses. How do we make sure people are able, when I say connect to opportunity, it could be not just jobs, it could be connecting to, how do I do fundraising? How do I actually get to meet the right people? How do I actually get to sell my, product as an artisan? It could be anything, right? It could be actually creating that. So for us, a few things that we've been doing is, firstly, from a nonprofit perspective, our solutions also, either we unlock a lot of, yes, we do unlock a lot of free courses from a skilling perspective, firstly. That's across sectors. We have, along with Microsoft, specifically during COVID, we came up with, we've actually now, millions of people we've been able to kind of upskill. linkedin.opportunity.com is a resource hub where we have a lot of unlocked courses. How do you kind of get people ready, employable, and all those things. The other thing is, how do we again have solutions keeping non-profits in mind? What is important for them? Attracting talent, of course, retaining talent, skilling, but also connecting to, when it comes to fundraising, what do they need to do? How do you connect with donors? How do you actually make those connections? How do you help non-profits build a good, build your brand, right? How do you actually talk about your story? How do you, like even Surabhi said, I want to know who are the leaders. How do I showcase those leaders? And that comes onto my company page as my non-profit. So how do we showcase all that? So, and then we also do ad grants. We do ad grants because we want to make sure that you're able to talk more about your organization and reach the right segments and the right people, either if it's for fundraising or for attracting talent. So a lot of those things which actually come together. And the last thing is also on collaborative articles. And Archana, you were asking me on that. A lot of you must have seen on your LinkedIn, you kind of get some prompts to answer some questions.
Yeah, I'll just come in. I was telling Ruchee that, in a sector like social sector where the learnings need to be so nuanced, right? Because we can't just copy paste it. I found that this collaborative articles actually brings out very nuanced insights, which often don't get captured in essays and blogs otherwise. So, yes.
Yeah, so the thought behind this is that, again, we want to create, as a platform, it's a knowledge marketplace. The wisdom and collective wisdom and knowledge of billions of members lies in the minds of our members. How do we bring that to the fore? It's not just when you write a long post or a long blog post, but even simple questions, which are, because LinkedIn recognizes your skills and your expertise through your profile, so those specific questions are served to you. When you're actually asked those questions and you even just spend a few minutes to respond to one question, you're actually adding value to so many more people within that space. So collaborative articles is something which is again an AI at the core of everything, is making sure it's serving the right audiences and it goes to the right people. But that definitely is something, again, we are trying to use to make sure you can tap into more wisdom from other members in that space.
Thank you so much. Gayathri, we've spoken about how ideal will be to clone y'all and to have more funders like you. But till AI gets us on that journey, what are some inputs you have for us on what is the role that funders and how does the ecosystem really come together to make this possible for our organizations? And what can our leaders do to be able to activate those ecosystem players?
I mean, I think we all have a role, right? Funders have a role. Intermediaries like an ILSS has a role. And of course, all of us as leaders in the sector do. I see the tides changing. I know when I started fundraising 2009, when I crossed over and there was no ILSS at that time. When I was raising funds, very often the question donors would ask was, but can I just do water bottles? Or can I do raincoats? And that, to get them to move to think about, no, but we're building a cadre of leaders who can teach, who will go out to do other things at, like similar to the Gandhi Fellowship at TFI. That took a step change, but it happened. And I see now, again, there is a conversation happening around capacity building, around leadership development. And I think that we, as at A.T. Chandra Foundation, you'll find, in fact, on LinkedIn, we write a lot of articles and a lot of case studies of sorts of NGOs that have traversed that journey and have been able to really create greater impact because of having the right capacities. We intend to do a lot more of those. We intend to collaborate with other donors. So GROW, for example, is another great example where I think more than 15 funders came together only to support capacity building costs of 100 nonprofits, 40 lakhs each. We see more of these happening. When we were working with the NSE and BSE and the Social Stock Exchange, one of the things we said is that you cannot, in your fundraising document, specify how much they can spend on overheads. Let that be part of the project cost. You can now create a project on the stock exchange only for your overheads. There's nothing to stop you. Right? So we're working on different areas like this that can open up capacity building funds for NGOs. My request to all of you is to ask. Right, the more I meet with a lot of, in fact, maybe smaller organizations, but a lot of NGOs who still feel hesitant to ask and who still kind of cover up those costs. So we did a project with Bridgespan, in fact, on pay what it takes, and found that 79% of NGOs are not asking for their true costs. And so my request to all of you is just ask. At the most, what the answer will be no. You ask again, it'll be no again. You ask a third time and make it embarrassing, like I said earlier. Yeah?
Ask till they say yes to us, and then when they say yes to us, they'll also say yes to a lot of others, which is good. So yes. Anu, would love to hear from you. We've spoken about the ecosystem. In this journey at ILSS, over the last 6 years, now working with over 250 organizations, what have
350.
what have you seen as the evolution so far? How hopeful are you at this moment? What do you see as the future of this?
No, absolutely. I'm totally an optimist. I think you have to be in the sector. It's even in the last decade, we have seen so much shift, even in terms of salaries. You know, I talk to so many people from the corporate sector who worry about the haircut, and I say, you won't be bald. It might be a trim, it might be a little bit of a crew cut, but it's there. So I mean, you know what? There's lots. I mean, you're talking to two very evolved philanthropists sitting in this panel right here, who really need to be cloned. I think what I would hope in the next decade is really more knowledge, so that and LinkedIn is really a great platform. By the way, I follow Reid Hoffman. And he talks about, he is guiding a lot of startups, but I think the startups, the social startups need an enabling environment and really need, more folks supporting social entrepreneurs. But, really more learning. So at ILSS, we are very focused on case studies, building toolkits now, knowledge products, so that people learn from other people's mistakes, right? I mean, why must I have to make my own mistakes if I can learn? So can we, across the 350 and now hopefully 1,000 in the next few years, nonprofits that we'll work from, can we learn from them their best practices? Can we put things together for other organizations to learn? Can we sort of templatize what Vishal's journey has been, so that another founder doesn't have to sort of go through some of, he can learn from. Peer learning is very powerful. So certainly we want to spend time and effort on building knowledge. And I came from the private sector. There's so much of training, and I went through change management. I think in those first 10 years, I did so much of training and development on myself. And then the next, 20 years, there was none. There's no money, unfortunately, but hopefully there'll be more money for, training leaders. They deserve that. The world is changing so rapidly. I would like to see more convenings like this. It's always wonderful to celebrate the work we all do, to learn from each other, to collaborate, to meet. So really, that's another hope. I would like to see funders really thinking more strategically and really going through that journey of evolution. So my wish would be, can we clone Amit and Ashish? They're really evolved. And Sanjeev and Surabhi, I mean, absolutely, because they're very evolved philanthropists and they think deeply about how to move the needle on within the sector. And then, of course, in the private sector, we are, one half of our work is with the private sector. Can we leverage them to strategically volunteer their time, sit on nonprofit boards, mentor young organizations? They understand businesses' processes. They understand, strategy. Can they actually give their time, if not their money, to the social impact sector? The problems are huge. India has population scale problems. We need a lot more for this sector to be able to move the needle on any of the indicators. So there's a lot to be done, but I'm optimistic, and we'll take it one leader at a time.
Thank you, Anu. One leader at a time. After all, we all know that we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And so as a founder, as a leader, just says why it's so much more important to invest in our people so that collectively we're all able to grow. What an incredible set of insights, as we all heard ultimately the maximum that we'll hear is a no, so let's keep asking. And we say in both in fundraise, particularly in fundraising, no today means it's only no today, nothing else. Tomorrow we can still ask, day after we can still ask, and then next year we can still ask, and then sometimes it definitely happens. And last but not the least, no, yeah, no means no for today, not now, yes. And as we've all been saying, I think in this topic around talent and leadership, our biggest learning has been that the sector is complex. Yes, the problems are multifold, are VUCA, complex, all of that. We'll all make mistakes, but at least can we make new mistakes, right? And so can we invest that time in learning from each other, not just the high level, because, you know, at ILSS, we always find that if we were to ask people to write an essay on these topics, we'll all write fantastic essays, right? But it's in actually living those, whether doing the fundraising in leadership, that when the rubber meets the road, it gets really tumultuous. And so what is the opportunity that we can learn from each other? Panelists, thank you so much. We do have time to take a few questions, and so we'll do that. We're also grateful to have lunch after, and so feel free to interact with the panelists at lunch. I think we're doing the questions on the mentee, so you might have to use that. Yeah, thanks.
Unfortunately, the QR code, we've not got any questions on that.
Oh, okay. Yes, so
Yeah, please.
if you don't ask, the answer is a no. Go for it.
Simple question to LinkedIn. So you're doing a fantastic job for the NGO program here.
Why don't you use the mic?
Sorry. The question is for LinkedIn. You are doing Sorry, the question is for LinkedIn, and I represent Nature Future. It's an organization which supports and creates an ecosystem for nature conservation organization in India. One typical issue that we are facing, especially with LinkedIn, Google, Microsoft, on their NGO program is FCRA. So FCRA issue being, the government a little bit hard on FCRA approvals. Can LinkedIn do something about FCRA requirement about your NGO program in India? Most of them don't get access to this particular activity.
Really, I'm not very sure if I can answer or solve for that. But like I said, we just continue to use and leverage the platform to make sure that we can get you access to the right people and the right, the right connections, and maybe policy makers to some extent. But I'm not very sure at this stage if I can, maybe.
No, simple. Basically, LinkedIn has to get Indian funds for Indian NGOs, and this FCRA issue will not happen.
Yeah, so maybe we can definitely use the platform from that perspective to kind of create more awareness, and at the same time, like I said, the solutions that we have for non-profits, even like we see the grants that we do, and we always come up with, we do a lot of webinars, and maybe if more and more organizations actually know the right way to leverage the platform and like connect with the right people within, like say the right people within India, if not just globally, I think I'm sure we can at least make a movement there for sure. I do feel that awareness is building, but still, like for nonprofits on LinkedIn, but it's still not enough. That's the reason why. I mean, in fact, like you said, and I was asked this question yesterday also. What is LinkedIn doing here? Like we know that we know you do something around this space, but I'm not very sure what you're doing. So we are also like, these are the efforts that we are making. So it's been like last few years that we co-host with the Nudge to be a part of Charcha, because we want to make sure that the platform can be used, clearly for this work. So yeah.
So thank you for all the insights, and I would just like to add that I am the latest crossover. So not even 6 months into the system, I was a banker, and one thing that I would want to add is that a few weeks back I went to meet my team in the bank, and they were all like, "Probably you have retired from your life." So from your corporate world, and you've retired. So that's an image that everybody still carries. that you've taken a retirement. And in fact, at times I feel I'm working more than what I was doing
You
earlier.
work twice as hard.
Yeah. And so I feel that probably one session wherein you bring the corporate world to this community and make them realize that, it's very, this is a beautiful sector to work for, and it has a lot to give. It's more satisfying, and it is a corporate world. It is nothing, we might say it's not for profit, but the way we work, it is for profit. So I guess probably we need a session wherein probably maybe pyramid employees or, the LinkedIn employees, they actually get engaged, because the engagement that we do is always, you come, you volunteer, that's it. They do not realize what goes behind it in terms of fundraising, in terms of HR, the talent, etc. So I think I would like to add to that. And any suggestions?
One last, yes.
Yeah, if I may add, over here, I think it's about the perception change, because traditionally, like even when ILSS started, there was always a perception that the corporate people have of the non-profits as very activisty, jhola type, and unprofessional. But I think that perception is definitely changing. But yeah, it's probably midway on the spectrum. They haven't, the corporates haven't realized the full extent of the work that is done, but it's definitely moved away from the jhola type.
I can tell you a couple of really strange comments I had from this one corporate leader who once told me, "Oh, people are very smart here." It's like, what have you been smoking, really? But there is a perception thing, and but I just want to tell you that I think we need more voices, such as yours, to be out there on LinkedIn, maybe, talking about the brighter side, because I recently heard a philanthropist, and he was saying to a bunch of other philanthropists, I happen to be in the room, and he said, philanthropy is like a serotonin rush. You feel good when you give, and people don't realize it till they don't start giving. And I thought, wow, that's great. Maybe more people should be hearing these things. So, your view of what is the sector now that you've crossed over would be important for people sort of who haven't seen the light.
Yeah. And in fact, several of our crossover leaders, they tell us that when we ask them who spoke to you first about the sector, they say that my children did. My son and daughter said, you know what, maybe you need to do this. And so it's interesting. One last question.
Hi, my name is Manan. I'm from Medha Foundation. Firstly, thank you so much for the discussion. Very insightful. I just have a question for all of you in the panel. Anyone can choose to answer it. What has been the biggest mistake or failure as a leader in your career, and what was your learning out of it?
That can be another panel in itself, by the way. Just saying. Okay.
Any big one that you can recollect, or something that stands out?
No, I mean, no, I just want to, it's not one particular one that I will talk about, but because, Surabhi, you actually spoke about, you both spoke about inner work and self-awareness. I think that when you actually overlook that, to me, that's a very big one. Not knowing, okay, when you know better, you do better, that's what it says, right? So, firstly, these two things, when you overlook what, you think you know and you know it all, I think that is the biggest mistake. You have to be that learn it all instead of know it all. And really kind of tuning in and listening. And I'll say very recently I did one, as a part of some coaching, the Enneagram report. I don't know if some of you heard that. So when I went through some of those reports on self-reflection, the first reaction was, and I think of myself to be, I'm self-aware, I take feedback. But I realized in that moment that I was getting into the zone of being a little defensive with myself. I was not talking to anyone, but when I was reading that report, and I think I caught myself in that moment that actually this is exactly what I shouldn't be doing. Why am I saying that maybe this is not me, this part is me, but this part is not me? I actually ended up spending a lot more time in really questioning and saying that, why can't it be me? Could be that's a blind spot, right? I think that I think for me is very critical and true. Even I look for that in my teams, that are we open to actually, then only we can probably learn and just get better each day.
I just want to add, you need to learn, unlearn, and relearn. because life is, if you're going to be stuck in a certain way, there has to be a learning mindset, but you have to also unlearn sometimes and you have to relearn. And listenability, humility, to say that I don't know what I don't know. These are important to save you from failure, but these are pit stops.
Yeah, I'd like to add one quick one here. So I would like to clarify that you can't really measure that this is the biggest mistake. You may keep making small mistakes, and some of those may really make you a better leader, right? And another thing I want to make clear here is that, of course, there's this requirement and perception that the social sector requires a lot of empathy and passion. Yes, it does, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have critical thinking skills, the ability to have a solution orientation, or to be able to solve problems. So, one should not forget the balance. As the sector evolves and you're getting people from the corporate, it's important to have both. You can't scale if you're only giving the empathetic, compassionate ones. Oh, I really love you, and I know how it is. But you have to say, okay, this is how we have to solve the problem. Let's think critically. So you really need a balance. And as your leaders are hiring their teams and trying to coach them or mentor them, I think everybody should keep these two things in mind.
I can share my perspective on this as well. I can't think of one massive mistake, but I think one common mistake which has led to bigger issues, keeping our people hat on, is when earlier in my career, if I noticed that there is a people problem, my tendency was to hope it'll go away on its own. And I've realized that when it's a people problem, you have to get in there, hold the bull by its horns, as they say, and try and solve it. It's very easy and to take the route of, not my circus, not my monkey, but as a leader, everything is your circus and everyone is your monkey, including yourself.
And on that note, thank you so much, panel, for those incredible insights on what does it take to prioritize this for ourselves, for our organizations, for the sector, and India at large. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Archana, and our esteemed panelists for that fantastic discussion on inclusive leadership, capacity building, and investing in leadership for catalytic change. We have a small token of appreciation, if you could all wait, and also for a photo. To the audience, request you all to please scan the QR code which is behind your agenda to share your feedback. And I know a lot of you had questions and we did not have time for it, so please feel free to meet the panelists after in the networking areas.